Lack of clarity causes the most problems in humanity, in anyone's life, not just in software development in general.
Project clarity starts with the early stages of what are we doing, why are we doing it, and then every step of the way, making sure we communicate progress, show what we're doing. So at the end, what we've built is something that they actually need, that they can use, that's going to be successful.
What other challenges are pretty common that you encounter?
Really understanding how to do it the right way and how to do it in a way that can be adopted by the end user.
I don't know if there's as much awareness about how much different it is to build a medical product than to just create a product. There's so much more that goes into it, just from a planning, from a process perspective.
Hi, welcome to another episode of the Med Device Cyber Podcast. Today we have a guest, Darcy Bachert, and we're going to be talking about software development and how to do secure software development, and a little bit about the Canadian Medtech market, because Darcy's organization, Prolucid, is based in Canada. So before we kind of dive in, you want to give us a little background on yourself, Darcy, and Prolucid, and maybe why the name Prolucid. I was wondering that earlier, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. So first off, thanks, Trevor or Christian, for having me on. As mentioned, Darcy Bachert, founder, CEO with Prolucid. We are an ISO 13485 certified software development firm based in Toronto, Canada. Been in business just over 17 years now. We actually do work in both medical and nuclear, so highly regulated industries, both with very unique development as well as cybersecurity type challenges, and work with customers really across the world. The bulk of them, though, would be North America, Western Europe, Australia, but others as well. And helping them take an idea all the way through FDA. And as you all know, cybersecurity is a huge part of that. So that's something that we help support with.
Awesome. And where did the name Prolucid come from?
So it's not what it maybe sounds like. It's actually two different words joined together. So it's project clarity is where it is. We find, I think, one of the most challenging things in any project is not so much writing the software, but really understanding what problem it is they're trying to solve, what they're trying to build. And so that project clarity starts with the early stages of what are we doing, why are we doing it, and then every step of the way, making sure we communicate progress, show what we're doing. So at the end, what we've built is something that they actually need, that they can use, that's going to be successful. So we try and build that into everything that we do, but that's where the name comes from.
I like it. I think the lack of clarity causes the most problems in humanity, in anyone's life, not just in software development in general. Especially like building a business or going after a goal, you have to have clarity. Without clarity, people rarely know what to do. They don't know what steps to take, and it makes it very challenging.
Yeah, and I think, you're the same. When we're talking to people, they need help. They don't have all the answers. They're looking for that. And so, you're not just there to solve cybersecurity or to solve software development. You're there to share advice where you can, give input where you can, ask good questions, because collectively that's what we're all trying to find, is that clarity on what we're building, how we're going to build it, do it the right way, and that's where we create the best successes. So
awesome. And what's the weather like today in Toronto?
So I'd have to do the conversion. It's almost 10 degrees. We've been dealing with blizzards and nonsense and a very, very long winter that's already started, but we have a bit of a thaw that we're dealing with right now. So I can't complain too much. I think it's probably low 50s almost here.
Gosh, I'm in Arizona. It's like 55 today. That's like pretty cold for during the day in Arizona. 55 Fahrenheit. Obviously, otherwise it'd be super hot. It was in Celsius. And Trevor's in San Francisco. He just moved to California not too long ago, and he's dealing with foggy weather and chilly weather typically.
The sun has finally broken out today. It's nice to see. Hopefully the sun stays out for the JP Morgan week next week. But yeah, it's been rainy, floody, earthquakey, fiery. Just every bad thing that can happen seems to happen to San Francisco.
I'm guessing you're quite glad you moved there then, is what you're saying.
Exactly. Yeah. I was actually in Toronto for the first time a couple weeks ago, and I don't think I've felt cold like that in a long time. That was incredible.
Yeah, the polar vortex hit, and it's not just cold, it's like a wet cold. It really, you feel it a lot more, I think. So, but welcome anyways, I guess behind or after the fact.
Yeah, well, we'll all see each other, I guess, in JP Morgan in San Francisco. So hopefully the weather holds out there and is nice.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah. So what are some of the primary challenges you deal with Prolucid deals with companies that want to have you help them with software for their device? I know you talked about clarity a little bit and trying to drive that clarity because from a software development perspective, obviously you need to know what the actual requirements are. And I know that's a challenge with people, but what other challenges are pretty common that you encounter?
There's quite a few. We tend to find that first one we've already talked about is the biggest one. When they have an idea of what it is they're trying to build. They have an indication of use. They have an understanding of the therapy or the treatment or the diagnosis that they're building. But really understanding how to do it the right way and how to do it in a way that can be adopted by the end user. There's a lot of very innovative ideas that, if when it's built, does not make the end user's life easier, it just will not get adopted. And so we'll do a lot of great things together, but not see the success that we want. So it's clarity on requirements. It's really understanding that environment, the end user, and how they're going to use it, and how it can make their lives easier and better and improve patients' lives, how they can get reimbursement, how they can get funded. I'm not saying software is the easy part of it, but a lot of the problems and challenges that we definitely have to work through are all those things around it, including just clarity around things like regulatory and cybersecurity, and making sure they do get to the FDA, that they're going to be approved and not rejected and sent back and have delays that go with it. So it is a lot of those surrounding parts that we tend to find some of the biggest challenges or gotchas for the companies that we help support.
And Toronto seems to be like the mecca in Canada for Medtech. Is that true? I mean, that's what it seems like from outside of Canada. I mean, you're there, so it might be different.
It's definitely the largest hub for Medtech, especially if you expand it into the Kitchener-Waterloo region. There's the largest number of companies would be here. Montreal does also have a really strong medtech startup scene. They do quite a lot of work in AI there as well. It's a bit of a hub, not just for medtech AI, but AI in general. And then as you get beyond that, there are smaller regions, Vancouver, Calgary, some on the East Coast. But this would be, I think you'd consider it the largest hub for medtech in Canada.
And I know Trevor and I have talked a lot about IEC 62304, which is the standard for secure software development for medical devices. And I know your organization follows that. When one of the things we try to educate medtech innovators on, or like when they're trying to find a software development partner, that they should choose one that actually has experience in regulated industries like you do, like Prolucid, and follows IEC 62304. Do you find that is a factor when people like choose you over someone else, that they are looking at those things, or is that more something you have to educate them on?
We find it's actually a pretty important thing to have. Before we had it, going back a decade before we were certified, ISO certified, we did follow 62304, but we found that most of the companies we worked with were local, in that they were fine with us not having everything. But as we got our full 13485, so the quality management system, and more track record of taking companies successfully with 62304 through FDA, through CE mark, through other regulatory approvals, that's really launched the international side of our business, where now the expertise level that we bring on these sides, it just really de-risks working with a company that has those accreditations. It just de-risks it from an execution point of view. The companies that are funding them, they like it because they know they're working with a trusted partner. The amount of expertise and knowledge that you bring around all these different best practices, just it really changes things. And so, before you have it, you're not really sure what the impact is, but after having it and having that track record that goes with it, it really makes a huge difference, not just on initial conversations, but again, the amount of value that a company like that can bring to a startup who has so many things that they need to figure out. And this is one where we can just bring it, educate them, and help take them end to end as part of it. So it's really important. And for any startup company that is looking at working externally, whether it's us or someone else, making sure they've got that got the quality management system, understand the processes, and have the track record of doing it, I think that's a pretty huge requirement or consideration.
Cool. And we're looking at ISO 1345. I know Trevor's in charge of working on that and getting that implemented in our organization. It's not a requirement for us. We do cybersecurity, but some of our prospects and clients ask about that, and I think it's just general good practice to have some sort of quality management system in place. So, Trevor, do you have anything to add on ISO 1345?
Yeah, you said something that really stuck with me, Darcy, and that's about de-risking this process. So any of these compliance areas, like even how you mentioned, Christian, we don't technically have to comply to ISO 13485. Our quality system is compliant. We don't hold that certification. That's something that we're currently pursuing. But building out that quality system was such a valuable exercise for us to solidify the processes that we had internally. Even though nothing really changes as much on the execution, the proven consistency, all of the traceability and artifacts working their way back have been tremendously helpful for us to make sure that we're providing a very consistent and a very good product. And then I think, providing evidence of that to any of our clients, it really does bring that risk down in their submission. When they see that we're following best practices, general good documentation practices, we have a formal quality system, we have a quality manual, procedures, plans, backup, recovery, disaster restoring and recovery procedures for anything that can go wrong there. It does provide a lot of assurance that we are doing things the right way. So I think it's very important to make sure that we are referencing standards such as that, even if it is a voluntary standard for a company like ours.
Yeah, no, I would agree that I think sometimes quality management systems are looked at as this thing that you have to have in place to get a piece of paper, you get your certificate and away you go. But how you actually do things within that and doing it the right way is way more important than just the piece of paper with the form around it. And I think one of the things that's probably a bit different for us than you is a lot of our customers, when we start working with them, especially startups, they oftentimes don't even have ISO 1345 themselves. And so what we're able to do is do all the development, design controls, documentation under our QMS. And then as soon as they have theirs, we can take that entire design history file and transfer it over. So it really does unblock them on that early stage while they get it, because it does take time to get a quality management system in place. And if they had to wait for that to get going, that'd be a pretty big delay. So, but I do agree with you, how you actually do things, how you document it, having a really strong process that's also efficient, that's where the value is, as opposed to just the piece of paper that says you have a QMS.
Definitely. Yeah, I think exactly like that. The certification itself isn't as worth as much as the process behind it. It's a good way to just show you have that process behind it. But yeah, it's even just trying to bridge that gap from ISO 9001, which is just general quality system practices, into the medical specific quality practices. ISO 9001 still has a lot of coverage on what you need to do, how to have good general practices within your documentation and within your quality system, but taking that step up into a safety critical industry such as healthcare, or, you mentioned that you're in nuclear. Obviously, that's not quite as much our area of expertise, but I'm sure it's very similar, making sure that you have these processes very strongly formalized in place. But yeah, it's a great way just to make sure that we have this consistency there. And I think it's correct for any companies that we would be reaching out to, or that are reaching out to us, or companies that you're working with. They should want to see these artifacts of compliance. They should want to see that we're handling things in a safe way.
Well, that's I think one of the challenges we have from a sales perspective, to set all these things up and to be very niche and regulated and have all the procedures means we're going to cost more than some fly-by-night company. But I know in software development and in cybersecurity, we have the same challenge. It seems like a lot of prospects are doing some comparison between us and somebody else, and they don't understand what they should be looking for. So they'll choose someone cheaper, but then they have to redo everything because it wasn't done to the right level of scrutiny that the FDA wants, for example, or it wasn't done for a regulated industry. So like part of our mission is to try to raise that awareness so they make the right decision. And we're trying to do it in cybersecurity. We also try to do it for software development, since they're closely tied together. Have you found that to be a challenge, Darcy? Like, you have a prospect on a call, and then they end up going to somebody else that doesn't even do regulated software development, but then later on they may come back to you to fix what was developed, what was, quote, developed.
It does happen. Yeah, I think there's some companies we talk to that really understand. I think companies that have outsourced before, either in their current capacity or in previous roles, they understand the value of a partner that has the right qualifications, that's got the track record of doing it successfully. And because time is money and redoing things can be what sinks a company. So most of who we talk to do understand that value of it. And in those cases, they're looking for a partner. So now we're competing against other companies with similar infrastructure and track record. And in that case, we can be very competitive. There's always going to be the ones that look at that low cost option or try and do it internally. We've seen some companies that do things internally and they do a great job because they've got the expertise and they can, and that's great. And if that's the case, you know what? If you ever have questions or you want a bit of extra horsepower to throw at a project, we're there to help. But we have seen some where they went with that low cost option. Oftentimes it's maybe more local or even offshore, and we've had to come in and fix it. And by the time that happens, they're now looking at months of delays. And I know you see the same. It's months of delays. The burn that's associated with that is way higher, both in time and money, than if they had just came to someone that can do it right the first time. And oftentimes, a lot of what was done is just not usable because it wasn't done the right way. So we're not going to sell to everyone. There's going to be some, as mentioned, they can do it themselves or they have that track record. But the ones that really get it, that's where having everything lined up and ready to go can be a really strong partnership. So we really try and focus there and fail fast in some of the other ones.
I think in the medical space, I don't know if there's as much awareness about how much different it is to build a medical product than to just create a product. There's so much more that goes into it, just from a planning, from a process perspective. And I think it can catch a lot of people off guard, even how long it takes to create a product. When you tell a lot of people trying to break into the medical startup space that you're likely not even going to see your product on the market for close to 7 years on average, that's a surprising figure to a lot of people, is seeing, wow, it really does take that long to create something like this. In the cybersecurity industry, we always have a term for kind of these quick shops that are just trying to churn out test results as fast as possible. They're called pen test puppy mills, and it's basically running an automated scanner or something, just trying to throw all the output of that into a report template and then give it away and do it as cheap and as fast as possible. And we have seen in the past a couple of companies reach out to us, ask for assistance with the cybersecurity process. We say, yeah, this is what it takes for us to do it from a manual intensive process. And they say, well, this guy over here can do it for this much lower price. And then they'll use those results, and the FDA is going to reject it for lack of sufficient testing. They don't see that it's done against patient harm as a primary metric. They don't see complete coverage of the system. They don't see that it included the depth of testing that is required for a medical device. They don't see the right documentation around it. And so it really is then, coming back to the drawing board from the ground up. And so I think the saying buy once, cry once really does apply well here.
Absolutely. I think you mentioned 7 years, and I'm not sure if this stat, it's probably worse now, but I think 7 years and 35 million is roughly what it takes on average to bring a device to market. And we do find, especially companies where they're coming from consumer or an industry where you can just throw something out and you still have to make sure the product works and so on. For those to really understand the medical side is a bigger challenge. Some of the startups that are doing this for the first time and don't have that bias are a bit easier to kind of communicate, but it's a long path and there's a lot of steps along the way. And I think, just like you mentioned, that knowledge of what it takes for success for FDA, for cybersecurity, for success for the software development side of things for FDA, and also user adoption, reimbursement. There's these layers of value that yourselves and us bring to an engagement that you don't get from the pen test puppy mill or the offshore development that has no experience in the industry. So I think we do our best to really message that value, and The ones that understand it, we end up having great partnerships with, but not everyone will. And oftentimes we'll fix it in a year or two down the road.
I think that stat is pretty sobering for people that don't think about the industry too much. 7 years and 35 million. You said that's average. And that's very different to throwing something up on the cloud like a SaaS platform and trying to make revenue while you're still building it, basically. It's a very different model, and it's very different from a software development perspective and a cybersecurity perspective. And we run across that challenge quite a bit. People don't understand, like, we can't just test this in 5 minutes and say it's good to go. We have to provide a level of diligence to this because, if your device is hacked, it could kill a patient or harm a patient. It's much more risky than somebody stealing a credit card number, for instance.
Yeah, and it doesn't just, that's 7 years. Obviously, there's a lot of steps there. There's trials that are built into that. There's validations, gathering data, all the way to approval. But I think also people sometimes forget what happens after your product's on market. And both with software development and cybersecurity, your journey does not end there. You have to make sure it stays secure. You have to make sure it's updated. There's going to be new features that are required. So it's not like you just throw the app out, start getting generate revenue, build as you go, test as you go. There's very clear steps you have to follow. And then once it's on market, you have to make sure it's secure. You have to make sure it's updated. So that's something that we also have to message to companies they're looking to build a device. This is not just a one and done. This is a whole product life cycle that includes potentially 5 years, maybe 10 years of ongoing maintenance while it's out in the field being used. And again, I think when you think about that, it's a bigger challenge. I'm not trying to talk people out of building medical devices because we need them, but there probably are easier things to do.
Yeah, I think especially even being here in Bay Area and seeing what the startup ecosystem looks like outside of this space, there's very much, I think even recently with the huge prevalence of AI development tools, try to get something out as fast as possible and just keep throwing stuff against the wall until something sticks. And that practice is common with both founders currently and even with investors and venture capitalists. You'll see a lot of the VCs in the area just trying to throw a little bit of money at everyone because they think that one of them is going to go, 10,000x and become the next OpenAI or whatever it might be. But I do think there's a very big trend of just trying to make something super fast, see if you get a little bit of user adoption, and then maybe take it off from there. And it's so hard to do that in the medical space, since then you're probably already 4.5, 5 years into development, fighting through regulatory approval. You've sunk millions of dollars into this project. And if you realize at that point that you don't have market fit, then you're in a really difficult situation. You can't just make a hard pivot and go, well, we tried to make a pacemaker, but now we're going to make an oxygen pump. You have to stick with the pacemaker. You've already built it. And so it's a lot different of a mindset. And I do think you kind of mentioned like people getting into this for the first time. They aren't stuck in that mindset of try to make something and iterate it. They're a little bit more new and willing to see exposure to a different way of doing things, which I think is a really big benefit that isn't really talked about too much.
Yeah, there's not a bias going into it so much. And you mentioned something, product market fit. This is, despite the fact that you have all these restrictions around what you can do, we do find that is an area that we have to challenge on quite a lot. People are so focused on the core research or the core science or proving their algorithm does what it needs to do. They don't spend enough time talking to the clinicians, the nurses, the doctors, the end users, and really understanding not just what this technology can do, but how they would use it, how it integrates with their workflow. Because product market fit is when you've got a solution to a real problem that is easy to use, that integrates well, that they can't wait. They're wondering when they can get it. And so it is still critical. It's harder to do in medical than when you just throw an app out, like you mentioned, you just throw it out, you see what hits. If not, you pivot and you do something different. You can't pivot the same, but you still can talk to people. And there are things, the formative and the summative and other types of steps that are supposed to support with that to a certain level. But we do find it's an area where sometimes we will say to people, you need to go talk to your end users because you don't know what they want yet. And if you don't know what they want, we're going to spend a lot of time building something that they can't use. So you still, again, another challenge of medtech that maybe doesn't exist is getting product market fit without being able to put a product in front of them or demo device, it's trickier to do, but they still have to find a way to do it.
Yeah, we've been talking a little bit about de-risking, like choosing like software development that understands the industry, a regulated industry in medtech, or cybersecurity. I know some investors that have changed how they invest, and they only invest in alumni or people in the Medtech Innovator Program, as an example, or some sort of accelerator program, because they have much higher success rates. Because in the past, I've talked to investors, and they've said 1 out of 10 of their investments actually succeed, which you have to get a very high return on an investment to make it worth your while if those are your odds. But on the contrast, if someone goes through this program like Medtech Innovator, which I know you support, the odds are like 90% of them, or something like 85% succeed. So it's very different. I know, like I said, investors are just now saying, I'm only going to invest in people that go through some sort of accelerator program. What is your perspective on that, Darcy? And then I'll turn it over to you, Trevor.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that the stat that you mentioned, so 1 in 10 startups, and this could be slightly changed by now, 1 in 10 startups survives. 1 in 10 of those will make it to 5 million in revenue. So if you think about the odds of that, 1 in 100 companies making it to 5
so
million
1 in 10 actually exists, but only 1 in 10 of those will make it to 5 million max in revenue, is what you're saying.
5 million in revenue, yes. So it really, there's a lot of companies that exist in medtech, in the US alone, probably in the 8 to 10,000. There's a lot of startups. So, as an investor, you're looking at where are you going to put your money, where's the best bet. And, the Medtech Innovator Program you mentioned, we're also partners as you are. Fantastic program. A lot of it comes down to their selection process, having 1,500 applicants, and from that selecting, around 150, 200 that pitch. And then of that, around 40 that actually get into the program on an annual basis. And so they are really challenging all those things as part of the program, not just what is the core technology, but they're looking at the team. How good is this team? How open to feedback are they? How strong of a product market fit do they have? Do they understand reimbursement? Do they understand regulatory? So they really challenge everything to get selected in. And then when they do get selected in, they go through a pretty intensive mentoring process, pitch competitions, and coming out of that, these are the companies that, there's others that haven't went through the program that have been highly successful, but the ones that do go through it, the stats, I think it's over 90% of them, and over 10 years of history, are still either been acquired, went public, or in business. And so, as an investor looking at companies to really target, I think that's a great checkbox for just the quality of companies in that alumni cohort that exists.
Yeah, I think playing a little bit of the other side of the conversation is, how many of these do you think are companies or products that were already bound to succeed? You mentioned looking at companies where they have a mature regulatory process, they understand how to go through this process with determining reimbursement, understanding this product market fit, and they have a genuinely good product before going in. And so I think that accelerator programs like Medtech Innovator, even going back to things such as Y Combinator for more general startups, it's a great way. And the proven success metrics from these are the numbers are just there. These companies do better. They succeed more, they get more money, they last longer, and they have bigger outcomes. I do think that there's a lot of it where you aren't going to see nobody's inventing a problem and trying to find a solution and then getting into Medtech Innovator. They're looking at companies that do have a good fit, that are actually solving a real problem, and they're doing it in a good way to make sure that they are giving those companies a leg up. But yeah, anything to try to avoid. I think from an investor perspective, it makes perfect sense to try to look for these companies, which historically are proven to be much more effective and much better companies than these scrappy ones where they're inventing a problem and then trying to invent the solution.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, it's one thing to get a product to market, but I still believe the biggest challenge for medtech startups will be when they have to sell. They're getting it to market or getting to FDA approval is hard enough, but now you have to sell. So getting to that 5 million in revenue or beyond is incredibly. We see a lot of companies that get to market and the sales are not there, and that's one of the things that the Medtech Innovator Program really does challenge as well. Trevor, as you said, it's not a solution looking for a problem. They have a problem identified that they're solving, and they really look at things like reimbursement, market adoption. Do you have the KOLs on board? Because if all those signs exist, all those things are checked off, the process of selling into the market is going to be a lot better and a lot higher likelihood of success. So it's so many different things that factor into it, but as a program, a pretty fantastic one to be part of.
You mentioned you do software development for nuclear as well. Is that right? Which
Yes, we do.
Nuclear or Medtech? Which one is more stringent? Would you say?
So we have 9001 as a quality management system, which is the base. So 1345 for medical is definitely more involved. There's a lot more that has to be done for medtech, especially with the FDA and CE mark and everything else. The nuclear side of things is a step above that again. The quality designation we have allows us to write software that controls reactors. We're not actually writing software that controls reactors right now. We're primarily working on inspection and maintenance of them. But the quality management system there is extremely prescriptive, and even more so than 1345, written from the point of view of building a physical reactor as opposed to writing software for it. There's a lot of misunderstanding of what software is and how it's built. So that does make it a bit more challenging. But I think from a public perspective, to know that the quality management system on the nuclear side is even more stringent is probably a good thing, because if something goes wrong on a reactor, it's not ideal. And it is more challenging.
Yeah, I guess you also had things like Stuxnet, which I guess is not really a typical nuclear facility, but it was similar, right? So that was took advantage of a vulnerability also.
Yeah, there's been a few accidents that have happened. If you overall look at the amount of accidents related to oil and gas as opposed to nuclear on a per capita basis, it's non-existent. The nuclear side is extremely safe. But when you had Fukushima and Chernobyl and the other things, which were either gross human error or natural events that are pretty hard to plan for, obviously it gets a lot of attention. But as an industry, it's over the last few years, it has really taken off again. There's a lot of new builds going in, and with all these AI data centers that are extremely power hungry going in across the world right now, we just don't have the power for them. And so nuclear's SMRs in particular are a big investment that's happening to help with that side of things.
I didn't really think about that perspective, because I thought nuclear, there was a push to like move away from nuclear and have solar and wind farms, but it sounds like with all the data centers, we need more energy than solar or wind farms or anything else can provide. So we're back to building more nuclear facilities, it sounds like.
It is, and right now, I mean, they're building gas and oil and coal plants to support them, and it's really challenging the grid. And there's a lot of actually states in the U.S. now that are pushing back on data centers because they just don't have the infrastructure to power them, and a lot of money going into it. So the nuclear side was kind of a downward industry from for the last 20 years up until 2022, and then some geopolitical events kind of changed the view on that. The challenge with solar and wind is that it's not always, the sun's not always shining, the wind's not always blowing, and so you need a lot of storage to be able to level it out. Whereas nuclear can be a very sustainable baseline energy source. There's no carbon emissions during generation, so it's one of the cleanest forms of energy, and it's extremely scalable. So a lot of tailwinds pushing that industry along right now, which is great, as opposed to previously where it was, for public perception, kind of a lot of pushback.
So
I think just the physical footprint too of nuclear is a big factor to consider. I know that
compared to like
a lot of the
solar
larger tech companies
or wind farm or something.
Yeah, exactly. So out little ways past Oakland, when you're driving out from here to Nevada on the 80, there are the massive solar farms covering both sides of the highway, and it takes up so much land, especially in a place like California, where we have these huge concentrations of data centers and huge concentrations of AI companies. Land is extremely, extremely expensive here. And so when you have, a square mile of land of solar farm, comparing that to a square mile of nuclear, you're getting an exponentially higher amount of energy out of that nuclear plant. So you're able to create so much more with so much less space. I'm personally I love nuclear. I wish that there was a stronger push for it across the board, especially with all these huge problems that we're facing now in the data space. But it's just such a more efficient way to produce this energy.
Yeah, where I grew up in Arkansas was next to a nuclear facility, and I toured that facility a number of times. The only thing that was environmental and I was naive back then in high school, was they had to cool. They had that big tower where they dropped the water that was hot. So and it ran into like a river. So the river for a while was hot. I think that's the only really environmental thing, unless there's a leak or something, right?
Yeah, you need a source of water for cooling. But all these big data centers have the exact same thing. They need they're very water intensive. So there are only certain places. Lakes are a great example. We have a lot of Great Lakes in the region here, and so there's a lot of nuclear that's built right against them. So you do need
what do the
that.
Data centers need the water.
There
for?
is. Sorry?
So the data centers need water also.
From a cooling perspective, most of those data centers they're pretty intensive on that side as well. They're usually built along. They'll need sources of water to go with it, and along with the power for cooling and heat and everything else.
I'm excited for the push for launching the data centers into space and dealing with the cooling problem through that means. I think still a little ways off, but I do think it's actually closer than we might even think, and I think that's going to be a big push in the future.
Do you think so? How are we going to transmit the data back to the U.S. quickly or to the Earth?
Well, that's probably going to be the big constraint is you don't do it quickly, but you can store a massive amount of it for far cheaper. And so I even think at the current costs of storing and processing a lot of data, it's going to become a little bit more cost effective quickly, as long as you don't need the rapid retrieval. And so then I think that's going to be the next thing to figure out is that rapid retrieval side of things. But I know even like in the Shenzhen Bay in China, and I think they're trying it a little bit here in the San Francisco Bay, but they're also just sinking these data centers into the ocean to try to benefit a little bit from that cooling.
Do they actually have any operational ones in the ocean right now?
There are a few in China, and I believe there are a couple on the Oakland side in the bay here as well.
It seems like that would disturb the ocean, and the fish would heat up the ocean.
Yeah, everything disturbs the ocean in the bay. We're not supposed to eat anything that comes out of the ocean here. You'll get mercury poisoning, lead poisoning.
Really?
You'll grow a third eye. It's crazy.
A little bit of radiation.
Yeah. There's so much heavy metal poisoning in the ocean here.
Oh wow! Because all the manufacturing and facilities there, or what's causing the heavy metal poisoning?
Manufacturing, shipbuilding, even now what's the big techie hub in Soma here in San Francisco used to just be industrial, and it's still all these converted warehouses everywhere, but they were storing God only knows what out there. And so walking through the, I guess that would be the east side of San Francisco, you'll see signs put up on a lot of these buildings, hazardous material site, nobody can enter them, and they're just boarded up and abandoned.
They don't like tear them down or clean them up, they just leave them like that. So it's like leaking hazardous material into the ocean, basically.
They leave them like that, and then eventually they convert them to apartments. And so I'm hoping I can cash in on the class action when it happens. But it leaches out into the San Francisco Bay. And so there are big notices that you're not supposed to eat anything that comes from inside the Golden Gate Bridge, except for halibut, because those only come in temporarily and leave.
Oh, no. I just bought a bunch of sardines and oysters. Hopefully none of those came from that area.
There you go. Yeah, I think they're still getting those up in the Humboldt Sea and out by Monterey.
Okay. Yeah, you got me hooked on the sardines, and then I kind of migrated to oysters as well. So,
well, I still have some from Portugal from this summer, so I'll have to have some when you come out to San Francisco next week.
We went to Monaco, and Trevor ate nothing but sardines, and then he slept on the top of his boat. And what happened, Trevor, about the seagull or whatever?
Yeah, so we go to sleep on top of the boat, and we had, some wine and sardines and bread out, and we were just eating that, and then I fell asleep up there. And I woke up, I felt this little tapping on my chest. And I wake up, I open my eyes, and there's a seagull right here, staring right into my face. And I was kind of freaked out for a minute, sat there and stared, but as soon as he saw I woke up, then the seagull freaked out and was running all over the place.
You might be one of the few people I know, Trevor, that has a real passion for sardines. It's not it's not the typical go-to that I hear from people. So that's very interesting.
He got me hooked on sardines too, but he ate so many that the seagull probably thought he was a big sardine. He's like imitating sardine, odors and stuff. Yeah, but I've got since that trip, I've trying to find like. The sardines he bought in Portugal are like really good, so I try to find good ones as well. I bought some at Whole Foods yesterday, but I don't think they're as good.
there's this store not too far from here, and they'll sell in a single can of sardines they have some that are like $90 and super, I don't know what they do with them honestly, but they have, maybe it's the California tax, but they charge for those now.
$90 for a small tin of sardines is pretty expensive.
If they gave them to me, I'm not sure if I would eat them. So I apologize as a Canadian. I'm so sorry, but I'm not a sardine guy. So I'll wait for you guys to convert me.
There you go.
Yeah, that's pretty easy to do if you're on a boat in Monaco with the right champagne and bread environment.
That's not pretty awful.
Cool. Well, we're coming up on time here, so I like to go around the room and ask for last-minute words of wisdom. So I'll start with Trevor. I usually start with Trevor, and I'll go with you, Darcy, next. For our audience, what's some departing words of wisdom?
Well, I think there are two angles that I want to come about this for. The first is don't invent your problem. When you're trying to understand what you're doing with your product, you can't just go through iterations and try to pivot back and forth as fast as you can like you do traditionally in tech within the medical space. So really drill into your problem statement. What are we trying to solve? Collect feedback from physicians. How would you like to use this product? Does this make sense? Is this effective? I think that another thing that we didn't really get into but comes up as a constant concern for medtech startups is how is a physician going to use this? Physicians don't like passwords. They don't like complexity. They don't want to add new steps. They want things to integrate into an existing workflow for it to be easy and efficient for them. So start with these considerations and then work your way back. And then as the second part of it, just be sure that when you're building this, build it with quality. Do not try to just cobble something together and see if it works. Start with the quality artifacts. Start with your risk management at the beginning. Don't write any code until you understand what you're going to do in the event of a problem. How are you building this code safely? How are you building this code with security in mind? So those are, I guess, two closing thoughts.
Those are excellent. I think the first one, I probably would have said the exact same thing, but because you already did, I'll share a couple of others. A lot of what we talked about here are some of the challenges, how long it takes, how much it costs, the chances of success. And so I don't want people to be, concerned or, I shouldn't do this. We do need these technologies. So there are great resources out there to help make that journey a lot higher, a lot better, a lot easier, a higher likelihood of success. We talked about the MTI program. That's a great example of where you can go to find a network of advisors and people that can support you along the way. If you don't have all the expertise that you need internally, find people that have done it before that you can work with. Blue Goat yourselves on the cyber, for us on the software side of things. There are a lot of great partners out there that can help make that journey a lot easier and take you from the odds of success being on the lower side into as Trevor mentioned, a clear problem you're solving, a really easy way of integrating the right partners along the way, the right accelerators along the way, just in taking something and really making an impact, make a difference. So I think there's a lot of great resources out there, a lot of great groups that can support. So contact them, talk to them, pick their brains, take advantage of it, because we're all here to help.
And I'll add two things that my wife, Melissa, works for the company. She used to be a nurse. And a couple of things she mentioned with Medtech is the innovator would bring a product to the hospital and they would try it out and they would love it. But then they never saw the product again because they got the buy-in from the people that would use it, the users, but they didn't get it designed properly from a cost reimbursement strategy, for instance. So she's seen that problem, and she's also seen the other side where they got it approved from a reimbursement perspective, but nobody wanted to use it because it wasn't easily adopted in the environment. So you have to consider both those angles. Cool. Well, we'll close here. So thanks for tuning in, everyone. I hope you found value in this episode, and we hope to see you on the next one.